This is getting out of hand as we have multiple new reports that have dropped surrounding Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and his future in Toronto, as one new report has dropped revealing some big details surrounding the conversations and dialogue between the front office and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. even after the regular season has started. So stay tuned for that on this episode, as well as break down. We have some other updates surrounding the game tonight. It's going to be a wild one and some interesting conversations to be had surrounding the lineup. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support has been absolutely unbelievable. If you want to help us towards our big goal of 20,000 subscribers, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support. Ladies and gentlemen, let's dive right into it. There's a lot to go over today. And obviously, the Jays are coming off of a brutal loss against Baltimore in their home opener. I was there in their season opener, and it was... the atmosphere was pretty bad. However, we do have some new updates as it pertains to Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s contract extension, which we'll dive into now. And then, of course, we'll dive into some of the other updates later in the video. But let's start with this. Now, this dropped before the game yesterday, and it came out from Buster Olney. We've had some other negotiations since then, or reports on them, sorry. The Blue Jays have made another offer in their negotiations with Vladimir Guerrero. Per sources, a gap remains still between the two sides. So we know that a report came out a week ago from Hector Gomez saying that the Jays were going to re-engage in an offer, and then after that, we had another report come out, a couple days later, and Mark Shapiro, of course, came out and said they're very confident in their ability to get Vladdy, and then, Ross Atkins, the day before opening day, said the same thing. But ultimately, the Jays did re-engage, and let's not forget, February 18th was the initial deadline for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Clearly, that was just a made-up deadline to a degree because they are still negotiating in these contracts, but the Jays made another offer. But that offer was not accepted. It was still declined by Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And clearly they knew, I think the front office knew what goodwill would have, the goodwill would have done with the fans if they were able to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. specifically extended before opening day. But even now, getting him extended before the series, ends against the Orioles on Sunday would be a pretty big deal here. And it seems they're still trying desperately to do so. And then Hector Gomez came out yesterday and confirmed Buster Olney's report and said the Blue Jays offer would be in the range of 14 to 15 years and 550 to 600 million. Now, this is where it gets a little bit out of hand, because if this is the case, and Hector Gomez was the first one on, and I believe it was March 16th or March 20th, one of those two dates where he was basically saying that the Jays were going to re-engage and try to get somewhere closer to what Vladdy wants. And clearly, that was the case. We had Shai Davidi come out and talk about it. You had, of course, Buster Olney come out and confirm it, an ESPN reporter. It's about as reliable as it gets as it pertains to, a firm report that the Jays actually did re-engage in contract negotiations with Vladdy. And it's at the point now where this is extremely interesting, because if he didn't accept, if the offer was indeed like 550 or 600 million, which you assume would be, after or before deferrals, but regardless, that's around what reportedly he wanted. The question then becomes, where is he actually standing? And it seems like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. actually wants to just test free agency no matter what. And that's what Joe Siddall said earlier on in the offseason. That's what a lot of the sentiment seems to be around the league, is like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is not going to sign an extension unless it's a ridiculous amount of money. But even then, 550, they offered him even 550 million. That is a ridiculous amount of money, probably more than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is even worth. And it's at the point now where with all these different reports, things are starting to become a little bit out of hand, because if this is the offer, I have to applaud the front office for actually offering this amount of money, because that is a ridiculous amount. We know they already extended, according to Shai Davidi in his article there a week or two ago, they already extended their budget beyond what they were comfortable going to. And then, of course, they extended it again clearly here before opening day in a last-ditch effort to get the deal done. And that's clearly what they wanted to do. They wanted to get the deal done. They wanted to make it so Vladdy is going to be a Blue Jay for the long term come opening day. And of course, yesterday he went 0 for 2 with 2 walks. Tonight's going to be a big game. I mean, the Jays need to win these games. Obviously, we'll dive into that in a minute. But some other interesting points here from Buster Olney. Said something worth remembering the Vlad Jr. negotiations. By the end of the season, he will already have made $75 million in his career. He's got leverage in this moment because he can talk to all 30 teams at the end of this year. It's not as if this current negotiation is his one shot at money. It's not like he's a 0 to 2 year service time player getting his first big deal, which is a valid point here. He's not a guy like Bobby Wood Jr., who got extended very earlier on in his career. A bunch of these different players, especially, on the Braves, even Michael Harris, all these different things, albeit to a much lesser degree, Acuna Jr., who took, team-friendly deals because at the time they were guaranteed less money, injuries, all these different things. Vladdy is 1 year removed from being able to fully test the open market. He's not a 2-year service time player, 0 to 2 year service time player, and because he's not that, it's going to be a lot harder to extend him, is what he's saying here. And you can see this here from Thomas Hall. As suspected, the February 18th negotiation deadline was more of a tactic than anything else. Certainly appears both Vladdy and the Blue Jays camp will keep an open dialogue this season, which is something that is good. It's not surprising the front office made a late push to try to get something done. Perhaps they try again around the All-Star break. Doubt there's much negotiation between the two sides, and now the opening day is here, though. And that's the big thing, right? We're now at opening day. I had to assume that they're going to be locked in on the season. I think there is still room for conversations to be had and all these different things, but he's not a young player. He's not a rookie, a sophomore, or anything like that. He's not a 2-year player. He's going to be probably waiting at this point for the regular season to get heavily underway before he resumes contract negotiations. This was an interesting thing from John Heyman. He came out and said the Blue Jays need to lock up superstar Vladdy, and someone needs to explain why they spent $58 million on Kirk while Guerrero waits. I think this is a completely dumb take. It makes no sense. Obviously, one player in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. doesn't really want to extend now. It should have no effect on what the Jays do otherwise, because them extending Alejandro Kirk, if they would have kept the same mindset about pushing it off, they'd be in the same spot where they are with Kirk, with Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And I think if anything, extending Alejandro Kirk on a team-friendly deal helps the case to pursue Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to stay here long term, because they have their catcher locked up for the future. So pretty dumb there by John Heyman. Just want to throw that out there. And of course, it is going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. A couple other things here, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up. Alan Roden spoke out on his debut with the Blue Jays. He said, "I've been prepared. I'm ready to go for this game for a long time. I've been excited into the past week." So when Schneider told me it was just an affirmation of what I wanted to do, I was trying my best out there. And obviously, Alan Roden had a fantastic game, probably the best at-bats out of everybody. And this is something I want to bring up because yesterday, of course, the starting lineup was very intriguing. It didn't, we had Andres Gimenez in the cleanup spot, which is something that is interesting. It makes some sense, but at the same, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it worked. He was, he had the home run. I think now that Alan Roden has seen his first bit of MLB pitching, I think for tonight's lineup, it's not released yet. It'll be released soon. But regardless, they should have Alan Roden. I'm curious to see what they actually do with the lineup, but they should have Alan Roden as the leadoff hitter. You can see here, Roden, Guerrero, Bichette, Santander, Wagner, Springer. I think that's a great top six, hell of a top six. And even having Andres Gimenez down at 7 extends the lineup so much. And they have Alejandro Kirk at 8, which is a little wild. But even then, this lineup looks so much deeper than the one we saw yesterday, simply because it's the same bodies, just in different orders. And I think having Alan Roden, who is an on-base machine, up top in the top of the lineup is going to be something that's very, very crucial. Also, one quick note regarding the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. situation. Mike Rodriguez, who initially tweeted that the Jays were in on resuming negotiations before Buster Olney said it, so clearly reliable and reputable, he said they are still working. So we'll see if they ultimately get a deal done there. I wanted to add that in as well. But one final thought before we wrap up, ladies and gentlemen. Here are some of the advanced analytics projections. They have the Jays finishing in the wild card 2 spot. There's some predictions as well by a bunch of different people. I just wanted to bring this up because it's an interesting graphic. Where do you guys have the Toronto Blue Jays finishing in the AL East? And what are your AL East rankings? Obviously, the season started. The Jays are currently last in the AL East with the Rays not having played yet. Every other AL East team won, unfortunately. But heading into tonight's game, what are your guys' predictions on not necessarily just tonight's game, but the standings going forward and where the Jays finish? But that'll wrap it up. Let us know down below what your thoughts are. Cheers.